IMF and the World Bank were created in Bretton Woods in New Hampshire in the United States. It was in 1944. None of the African countries participated in its creation. It was British and American economists, and it was specifically designed at that time during the rebuilding of Europe, the implementation of the Marshall Plan. And when we regained our independence as African countries, were then grafted into it. IMF and World Bank are economic enslavers. What they are designed to do is to ensure that we are in a perpetual state of debt. You can never get out of IMF and Bretton Woods institutions, generally because they want to ensure that they control your economy, and when they control your economy, they control your politics, and when they control your politics, they control you, and when they control you, they bring in military bases, and when they bring in military bases, they determine who governs you, because if you don't play ball, they are going to instigate the armies to overthrow you, because in any event, African armies want to be trained in Sandhurst, they still want to be trained in the United States of America, so their world view is still dictated by those foreign powers. What we must do as a continent is to use our institutions for purposes of financing our affairs. The African Development Bank was going to be such an engine, but you now know that it has almost 88 shareholders. The second largest shareholder is the United States of America. Japan has shareholding. The United Kingdom has shareholding. France has shareholding. They have seized and captured and paralyzed African Development Bank. It is only African in name. And as they say, he or she who pays the piper calls the tune. Even this sanction that you see being deployed against countries such as Zimbabwe is because we don't have Pan-African institution. And one of the things that I hope that African Union will begin to do, particularly when we are going to celebrate 60 years since the creation of the OAU, now AU, in the 23rd, 24th, and 25th days of May in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, is to rethink how we finance our affairs. African Union itself is almost 70% financed from outside, financed even by NGOs such as GIZ and Roll Wallenberg Institute and European NGOs. And what they do is they simply tell you, if the agenda is climate, they tell you to go to climate. If the agenda is human rights, now the main agenda is LGBTQI. They tell you, if you don't behave, we are going to cut aid. And dead aid, Dambisa Moyo, Zambians, Dambisa Moyo talks
Economist,
about dead aid. And Greg Mills talks about why Africa is poor and what Africa can do about it. I think that should look at these books and what they have written in terms of research very keenly. There's a good book which has been written by the Korea Ha-Jun Chang called The Bad Samaritans. And in The Bad Samaritans, he actually specifically talks about and against the IMF and its activities in the continent of Africa and in Latin America and elsewhere, and arrives at the conclusion that as long as we are dependent on IMF and World Bank, our economies are simply going to be shadow economies of the American economy or the Russian economy or the Chinese economy or the British economy or the European Union economy. And the time is now. Latin America at a certain stage, Chile and Argentina actually, and Brazil, succeeded in weaning themselves off the breasts of the IMF and World Bank. We must now do it. If we don't, you'll be amazed. And even at a small level, we can make all these organizations irrelevant. Danida, SIDA, or this little organization. We tell them we don't want your money. They give you $100,000, they think they own you and own your future generation. They ask you to write report every week, and they proceed from the premise that you are a thief. You are stealing from them anyway. You have no independence. Your dignity is lost. So today, through my foundation, now we want to raise funds, but only from Africans. I believe
possible
that there are African millionaires and billionaires who, if we are able to persuade them that we are going to do a good job, should be the ones that are going to finance and fund us. Not George Soros or Bill and Melinda Gates, or Tony Blair Institute. These are neo-colonialists whose only agenda is to control us and to manipulate us. And when they sit, they look at us and say, oh, these God-forsaken people.
And you can see why they react so aggressively when individuals like Sankara said, we are not taking loans, or even Magufuli, who believe you
John
admire.
Joseph Pombe Magufuli demonstrated, and I had several meetings with John Joseph Pombe Magufuli, and he said, we are going to finance our activities through the taxes that we raise, and indeed, the Julius Kambarage Nyerere hydroelectric power was financed almost exclusively through Tanzanian resources. The gas from Mtwara to Dar es Salaam, the same thing. The SGR, almost the same thing. It can be done. And he demonstrated that it can be done. And John Joseph Pombe Magufuli is one person who said, I'm not even going to attend these useless meetings.
And he never did.
And he never did. He said, we have our embassies in those places. What is the work of our ambassador? Tomai Isidore Sankara said in 1987 at the meeting of the OAU, at that time, he said, we should even stop paying the debts. In any event, we deserve reparations for slavery. We deserve reparations for colonization. And if we take a joint decision as Africans that we are not going to pay debts, what will they do to us? Will they nuclear bomb us, all of us? So they need, and Thomas Sankara was right, that in order to liberate yourself from some of these things, some element of methodical madness is necessary. Not these individuals. Now you see the African leaders saying, oh, they agree with what I've been saying all along, that they should not all 54 of them be summoned to Europe and America. But you wait, during the coronation of Charles, they'll once again be trooping to London and they'll be herded into buses again. Then they'll come back and complain. So you must treat yourself with respect if you want to be respected.
And I think one of the things that aid does is take away that respect and dignity from the people, because you don't give them an opportunity for them to be able to work on themselves and do their own work. And at the same time, you make them dependent on you such that when you come, when are you leaving? Well, I'll be here. I'm here to stay, right? Which means that, and the problem is most of the times the problems that such foundations try to solve, they're never solved. If it's water problem, there would always be water problem as long as the foundation exists.
But how can you kill the goose that lays the golden egg? If it is poverty that feeds you, and poverty and conflict in Africa are multi-billion-dollar industries. The conceptual West wants an Africa that is poor and is in a perpetual state of conflict. Because that's how they supply guns.
And that's how they
weaponry.
Get minerals.
That is how they then take minerals for free. That is how they offload their harvests for their grains, which they don't need, whether it's Ukraine or the United States of America. That is how they are now controlling our seed, Syngenta and Monsanto. They don't want our traditional seeds. They want us to buy seeds every season, so they control our food chain. That is how the Chinese are now exporting tilapia to us. So we've got to really rethink. Sometimes it pains me when I see the possibilities and how our electoral process is hostile and toxic to the good men in this world. Good men and women are unelectable in most of Africa.
Unfortunately, that's the case.
Because the electorate is also poisoned. It is ethnicized. It has been made corrupt. The only stimuli that it responds to is ethnic and monetary. So when you come with ideas, they say, this one does not know what he's talking about. Somebody said that the typical African electorate thinks about what he called the stomach infrastructure. And once you take care of the stomach infrastructure, he or she thinks about nothing else. Tragic. And that is why young men like you and others must now go out into the rooftops and say no more No more. We've got to liberate ourselves from these chains. And it is being done. You look at young Chinese, young Koreans, young Vietnamese. They love their countries. But what is happening to our young people, because the political environment has been poisoned by selfish politicians, our young people are dying in the Mediterranean Sea, which has become a graveyard for young Africans in pursuit of the very elusive El Dorado, the land of gold. We must stop it.
And Africa, I'm thinking about it. Africa has a massive potential, such that if we are to say we are going to lock the continent and we have to produce everything that we are consuming, the question is, who is going to suffer? It definitely won't be us.
It is the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, Africa has built the world throughout the ages. Africa built Europe. Africa built America. Africa built Australia. Africa is building China. All the resources. You go to Europe today and you see the gold, the copper, the electricity, everything. It is from Africa. And that is why they came here and enslaved us. That is why they came here and took our minerals. That is why they are still coming here. Because Africa is the continent that has fed the world. When we talk about the mother continent, we are not simply talking about the mother continent to the extent that she feeds our own children, but she feeds the world.
And the world knows that.
And the world knows that. That's why she cannot be allowed to be free. And that is why she must wake up. And she can only wake up when her sons and daughters wake up. And we are not saying that when she wakes up, she's not going to feed the world. She will. But she will do so on her own terms and with dignity. But throughout history, Africans have been dehumanized, have been humiliated. And that is what we must stop.
And Africans have been made to feel inferior too.
Of course. It was a long thing. Kwame Nkrumah said it very well, that regaining political independence is the easiest. The most difficult is going to be dealing with this psychological impact where you are made to believe that you are inferior. You can see, even as we talk, and I've said it many times, we are taught to hate ourselves, to hate our names, to hate our character, to hate our color, to hate our things, so that even now, when we do things in matters as mundane as football, we still are attracted to European football. Even our tastes, we are made to hate our food. So we acquire a taste for Kentucky Fried Chicken. We acquire a taste for McDonald's. We acquire a taste for Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola. We lose taste for cassava and gari and mandazi. We must regain our taste and appetite for our own things and lose appetite for Kentucky Fried Chicken. We must lose appetite for Coca-Cola. We must lose appetite for Pepsi. We must lose appetite for Tarino. We must lose appetite for Fanta.